Hello everyone, welcome to PRP Coding YouTube channel. I am Raveendran Pillai. In this session, I shall explain about the new data protection features in .NET 8. So let's start. I have created an ASP.NET Core Web API project and it is opened in my VS Code editor. If I click on this project here, you can see that the target framework is set to .NET 8. Now, in this project, it contains a classification folder, an extensions folder, and a models folder. In the models folder, it contains a class customer with ID, email, account number, and Aadhaar number as properties. In the extensions folder, it contains a static partial class named customer logging. This class is basically used to create an extension method to the iLogger interface. Here you can see that I have added an extension method named log customer details, which take an input parameter of type customer. Basically, this extension method is used to log the properties and values of the customer object. For that, the customer parameter is decorated with an attribute named LogProperties. This attribute is coming from the Microsoft.extensions.telemetry NuGet package. If I click on this project here, you can see that I have already installed this NuGet package. The log customer details extension method is decorated with a logger message attribute. The log level is set to information and the message property is set to customer details. Now, when we call the logger.logCustomerDetails method with a customer object passed as an input, then behind the scenes, it works like calling the logger.log information with a message as customer details followed by the properties and values of this customer object. Now let me open the program.cs file. Here you can see that I have created a minimal API endpoint with a route API/customers. In this endpoint, the iLogger interface is injected. A customer object with email, account number, and Aadhaar is created. Then I have invoked the newly created extension method logCustomerDetails by passing the customer object. Finally, I have returned results.OK customer. Okay, so now if we want to see the customer properties and its values in the console window, we need to enable the Json Console logging. For that, I have added builder.logging.add Json For a better visual output, I have indented the JSON. For that, here you can see that I have set the JSON writer options property with the new JSON writer options object with the indented property value set to true. Now let me run this application and test this endpoint via Postman and see whether we are able to log the customer properties and values in the console window. For that, I have opened the terminal window and let me run the command .NET run. And if I scroll up here, you can see that the application is listening in port number 5000. So now let me click on the Postman extension to test this endpoint. So here you can see that I have created a Postman collection named data protection with a request customer. Now it is loading. Okay, so let me minimize this. And here you can see it's a get request HTTP localhost 5000/API/customers. And let me click on the send button here. And let me expand this response. And here you can see that the status is 200 OK. It has created a customer with ID, with a new GUID, email, account number, and Aadhaar. Now, if I expand this terminal window and if I scroll down, here you can see that it has logged the customer properties and its values in the console window. You can see customer.Aadhaar number, customer.account number, customer.email, and customer.ID. So everything is working as expected. But writing personal or sensitive data into the logs would likely be a breach of the provisions that protect consumers. So it's very unlikely you would want to record that data in your logs. It would have been great if we could encrypt the sensitive data or just erase the sensitive data during logging. .NET 8 now supports redacting sensitive data in logs by using the built-in logging service. For that, we need to install a NuGet package named Microsoft.extensions.compliance.redaction. In the terminal window, run the command .NET add package Microsoft.extensions.compliance.redaction and click enter. Okay, the package is getting installed. And let me click on the project settings here. And here you can see that Microsoft.extensions.compliance.redaction is installed in our project. Now the next step is data classification. In this case, we need to perform data classification of customer properties. Based on the business requirement, we can have any number of classifications. But for this demo, I'm going to define two data classification. In the classification folder, here you can see that I have created a class, a static class, customer classification. And it is having two properties with name confidential data and personal data. The confidential data and personal data are of type data classification. So what exactly is a data classification? So data classification represents a single classification which is a part of data taxonomy. And it is coming from the Microsoft.extensions.compliance.classification namespace. The confidential data is returning a new instance of data classification. And here you can see that this instance is taking two parameters. The first one is the taxonomy name and the second thing is the value. So here I have used the customer classification as the name and the value as confidential data. Similarly, the personal data is also returning a new instance of data classification with customer classification as the name and personal data as the value. Now the next step is to decorate the properties of customer class with confidential data and personal data. We need to create two attributes for that. So let me close this terminal window and create a class, public class, confidential data attribute, and let me inherit from the data classification attribute. Okay. And here I am going to use the primary constructor approach, and here I will pass customer classification dot confidential data. Okay. Similarly, let me go and create the personal data attribute. So I can say public class personal data attribute, and let me inherit from the data classification attribute, and here I will pass customer classification dot personal data. Now let me open the customer.cs file, and let's make this email as a personal data and account number and other number as confidential data. Okay, for that you can just decorate it with personal data, and here decorate it with confidential data. Let me do the same here as well. Okay, so we have marked the properties as personal data and confidential data. Now the next thing is to configure the logging. So let me open the program.cs file and enable the logging reduction. For that, I can say builder.logging.enable reduction. Okay. Now what I'm planning to do here is that if any confidential data is found, then just simply erase that data in the logs. For that, I can say builder.services.add redaction, and I can pass the options. And I will say options dot set redactor. So here I can set the redactor here, and here I'm going to use the built-in erasing redactor. Okay, and this is expecting a data classification set. So I can say new data classification set, and here I can pass the data classification. So I will say customer classification dot confidential data. Okay, so this configuration will make sure that if any data is marked as confidential, just go and simply erase it from the logs. Similarly, let me add a redactor for the personal data. If any personal data is found, just hash the value in the logs. For that, I'm going to use the built-in HmacRedactor. This redactor is an experimental feature, so we need to manually disable the warning. Okay, so let me go and disable the warning. Okay, and here I can say options dot set HmacRedactor, and here I will pass an option. Okay, and here I will configure the option here, and let me semicolon. Okay, and you can say option dot key, and I will specify a key here. So you give convert dot to base 64 string, and I can say encoding dot utf8 dot get bytes, and here I am going to pass a hard-coded string as of now. So I'm going to say personal data is encrypted. Okay. Now let me add the key ID option dot key ID and set a value. So here I'm going to set a value as 99. So basically this key ID in the HMAC options is an identifier which is used to identify the key. And the last thing is like here we need to pass the data classification set, and here I can say new data classification set, and I can say customer classification dot personal data. That's it. So now let me go and run this application and check whether the confidential data is erased and the personal data is hashed in the logs. In the terminal window, let me execute the command .NET run. So the application is running. So let me switch to Postman here and let me click on the customer request. Let me minimize this window and let me click on the send button. And as a response here, you can see that it has generated an ID with a GUID ID with email, account number, and other number. Now, let me expand this terminal window. Here you can see that the Aadhaar number and the account number got erased from the logs. And at the same time, the email is hashed using the key ID 99. So this was the key that we have set in the HmacRedactor. So this is all about data protection in .NET 8. If you find this video helpful, then please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned for the next updates. Thank you.